Is there anyone with a medical background on board? We need to hurry, an elderly person needs help. I used to be a doctor, I said, raising my hand. Please help us, urged by a beautiful flight attendant. I proceeded to the front of the plane. This is the story of a once brilliant surgeon who was ousted from the medical world and encountered a crisis while returning to his rural hometown by plane. My name is Eugene. I was a doctor until just the other day. I was a neurosurgeon at a university hospital, and since my residency, I was favored by the professor, which allowed me to accompany him to conferences even ahead of other senior doctors. Soon after, a paper I presented at a conference was recognized, and at the age of 29, I was hailed as a genius neurosurgeon. As my fame increased from TV appearances and writing magazine columns, my clinic became so popular that there was a 2-month wait for an appointment. The hospital's policy was that while general appointments took 2 months, celebrities and the like were given priority in treatment. I primarily cared for patients in VIP private rooms, alongside my mentor and chief physician, Dr. Maxwell. My smooth career began to derail after Dr. Maxwell retired. Dr. Maxwell was a significant figure within the hospital's power dynamics, having been a powerful ally as a friend of the hospital director, Dr. Smith. Under Dr. Maxwell's protection, all I had to think about was maximizing my skills. After his retirement, the position of head of neurology was to be filled by an external hire, and it remained vacant for a while. Already holding the title of associate professor, I was temporarily assigned as the acting head, representing the department and coordinating with other medical divisions. There were many in the hospital who did not take kindly to my presence. Without Dr. Maxwell's backing, I found myself at the forefront of troublesome office politics. The especially problematic person was Dr. Vincent, the deputy director and head of surgery, who was notoriously harsh and often clashed with me. Despite this, since Dr. Vincent also primarily handled VIP cases, we had to cooperate frequently. At that time, Dr. Vincent was the primary physician for a famous singer, whose hospitalization itself was newsworthy. One day, I participated in a pre-surgical conference for this patient. The surgery would be performed by Dr. Vincent, of course, but there was a disagreement between my diagnosis and his. Despite repeatedly presenting the imaging and explaining, my views were dismissed, and none of the other doctors dared to contradict Dr. Vincent. Eventually, Dr. Vincent decided my diagnosis was wrong and proceeded with a different treatment. The patient did not survive. It was clear that the cause was Dr. Vincent's misdiagnosis and surgical error. However, he shifted all the blame onto me. I was blamed for the patient's death due to my supposed misdiagnosis. In this hospital, going against Dr. Vincent meant not being able to survive. Although a few nurses and pharmacists spoke out in my defense, they were dismissed as a warning to others. No doctor was willing to speak the truth, and I was left to take the fall alone, resulting in my departure from the hospital. My medical error, sensationalized by the media, effectively ended my future as a doctor. Disgusted with the world of medicine and losing my passion for saving lives, I decided to return to my rural hometown to take over the family inn. It's about a 2-hour flight to my hometown. Normally, I would have flown first class, but this time I bought an economy class ticket and waited for boarding, and then in the lounge, which was noisy due to first-class passengers. A younger men were loudly celebrating with a few older men. Other passengers frowned at their unrefined behavior, but they continued their loud conversations, which were clearly audible. Derek is the main guest at tomorrow's conference. It's unprecedented for someone his age to be a professor. From such conversations, it was evident. Some doctors and their entourage were heading to a conference. The doctor, clearly younger than the others, was being flattered and acting superior. Well, it's a world I no longer belong to. Once on the plane, I started to read a book. After takeoff, it wasn't long before there was a commotion up front. Apparently, there was a medical emergency in first class. Sure enough, the doctors from the lounge were also on the same flight. There was no role for me to play. I realize that I'm thinking about this. I've quit being a doctor, I'm just an ordinary person now. Just when I thought it had quieted down, a flight attendant rushed in from first class in a fluster. "Is there a doctor on board?" It was a phrase I often heard during my active days. There were doctors headed to a conference in first class. From the content of their pompous conversation, I guessed they were from a major hospital. Had they not attended to the patient? "Excuse me, aren't there some doctors from a hospital in first class?" When I raised my hand and called out to the frantic flight attendant, she looked at me as if grasping at straws. "Are you a doctor? Could you please help us?" My gesture caused a misunderstanding, but I was curious why those doctors hadn't responded, so I followed the attendant without clearing up the confusion. Upon reaching first class, it was chaotic. A group of doctors from the lounge before boarding were surrounding an elderly couple, attempting to administer treatment. "What should we do, Derek? It's not subsiding," said a man anxiously observing the patient, addressing the youngest and most authoritative among them. The elderly man was having a seizure and had lost consciousness. "Ma'am, is this the first time your husband has had an epileptic seizure?" Derek, the man addressed as such, spoke to the woman who was pale and holding her husband's hand. "Epilepsy? This is the first I've heard of it. Is my husband having an epileptic seizure?" These symptoms are definite. While individual reactions may vary, they should stabilize soon. It's important to keep him lying on his side to monitor his condition. Your husband is lucky to have me treating him. His entourage nodded in agreement. After all, Derek is the next chairman of the American Neurosurgical Society. He's an authority in this field. Being on this plane was a stroke of luck. They praised Derek in chorus. As I was led through this exchange by the flight attendant, I found myself standing before the patient. Despite having quit medicine, the patient's symptoms and possible diagnosis instantly came to mind. "Ma'am, was your husband taking any medication for high blood pressure?" "Yes, my husband has high blood pressure and regularly receives medication for it," the wife responded to my inquiry. Hearing this, I directed Derek and his group. "This is a case of hyponatremia. Derek, administer saline immediately." Since I had quit medicine, I no longer carried emergency medical supplies as I used to. "What? Who do you think you are giving orders to? Derek isn't someone that a doctor who can only afford economy class should be talking to." His group confronted me aggressively. Anyone, please prepare an IV quickly. Severe hyponatremia can closely mimic epileptic seizures. It's common knowledge in neurology. Derek's entourage started murmuring among themselves. "Is Derek's diagnosis incorrect? That can't be." They exchanged confused glances. Meanwhile, the man's seizures started again. If a respected doctor lets a patient die on a plane, he might as well be erased from the medical society, I said firmly. One of the entourage finally called a nurse from economy class, and they began administering an IV to the patient. "You guys, do whatever you want." Everyone fell silent, watching Derek's reactions. After the plane landed, I was urged to accompany the patient to the ambulance waiting on the tarmac. I hesitated honestly. It's such a rural place. Nobody here knows me. I reassured myself and was about to board the ambulance when Derek yelled, "Know your place, bumpkin, you've embarrassed me." At the hospital, I explained the situation to the doctor and reported the treatment and medication administered. Thanks to the appropriate measures, the patient will be able to go home soon. By the way, Dr. Fumpson, which hospital do you work at? The doctor praised my intervention and asked. No, I used to run a clinic, but I closed it down and am on my way back to my hometown. I brushed it off with a casual lie. The doctor accepted it easily, saying, "It's a shame for someone as skilled as you." After ensuring the man was stable, I silently left the hospital. I felt like I recognized the patient's face somehow, but I quickly forgot about it as I hurried back to my family home. When I arrived, my parents and my brother and his wife, who help run the family inn, all welcomed me. Despite what had been said on TV, no one mentioned it. They simply accepted me back. It's getting tougher to manage as we get older, so it's really helpful that you're here to assist, Eugene, my parents remarked. I'll train you thoroughly. True to their word, I started helping out with the inn the very next day. Though the work was entirely different from what I had done as a doctor, it was refreshingly challenging. Eugene, you can't be so condescending. This is hospitality. My brother unexpectedly advised me. I didn't intend to be, but perhaps that's how I appeared. And the work at the inn starts early. Preparing breakfast, seeing off guests, cleaning rooms, welcoming new guests, and preparing dinner. The list of tasks was endless. Harder than being a doctor, huh? My father commented, to which I could only nod. By the end of each day, I was exhausted and fell asleep the moment I hit the bed, which spared me the time to dwell on my hospital days. My days passed in a blur. Just when I was getting used to the routine and starting to find my rhythm, a woman came to stay at the inn. What's the name on the reservation? The female guest was strikingly beautiful, almost otherworldly. I thought I had seen her face before, perhaps she was an actress or model. While I processed her check-in, she introduced herself. My name is Sophia. I didn't recognize the name, unfortunately. I'll take your luggage for you, I offered as I smoothly completed the check-in and led her to her room. Dinner is served in the dining hall from 5 to 9 p.m., and then, as I was about to leave the room after explaining everything, she stopped me. Don't you remember me? I paused and turned to look at her. Where had we met? Such a beautiful face should be unforgettable. You were on that plane, the one you helped the man. Ah. I instinctively pointed at her with a smile. You were the flight attendant on that plane. I quickly withdrew my finger, embarrassed. I apologize for the bluntness. I was just so surprised. She didn't seem offended, continuing with a smile. Actually, the man you helped was my grandfather. I was surprised again, but tried to remain composed as I chose my words carefully. Is that so? How is he doing now? Thanks to you, he's as lively as ever. It turns out it was hyponatremia caused by his blood pressure medication. Just as you diagnosed, he had gotten a stronger prescription because he was flying. Sophia spoke brightly, her expression changing rapidly, showing a different side from when she was a flight attendant. She had often stayed with her grandparents as a child because her parents were busy, and she grew quite attached to them. Her grandfather was especially fond of her, and she herself was a grandfatherly child. The doctors in first class at that time seemed too embarrassed in front of their subordinates to back down. It's a real problem if they misdiagnose like that, especially when it could be life-threatening. It was really fortunate that a doctor like you happened to be on the same flight, she said. Being stared at so directly and thanked made me feel ticklish inside. It was just by chance. Plus, I've already quit being a doctor. Now I'm helping out at this inn. Upon hearing that I had quit being a doctor, Sophia looked a bit disappointed, but she didn't ask anything more about it. So, you've changed careers. Even though this job looks tough, you seem to enjoy it, she said. Her comment surprised me. Indeed, getting thanked by guests here felt different from when I was a doctor, and I genuinely appreciated it. Maybe this job suits me better. Yes, I enjoy this job. It offers a different kind of fulfillment from being a doctor. I answered sincerely. Sophia, who was here on her precious vacation amidst a busy work schedule, was staying for 3 nights and 4 days. Although there aren't many tourist spots around here to visit for 3 nights, Sophia seemed to enjoy the places I suggested on the first and second days. When she returned, She excitedly reported where she went and what happened. You must have seen many places abroad, I said. She shook her head. There's still a lot to see domestically. Plus, traveling for leisure feels completely different from traveling for work, she explained. I listened to her, pondering her perspective. On the last day of her stay, a local festival took place. I hadn't known about it, but it seems it's an annual event that both locals and tourists look forward to. Oh, haven't you been to the festival yet? You can go after you finish preparing dinner. That beautiful guest, she's your acquaintance, right? Why don't you invite her? My mother suggested with a meaningful smile. She and I aren't like that, I protested. Well, surely a beauty like her is out of your league, she teased. I couldn't deny that. Eventually, after dinner that day, I decided to approach Sophia as she was heading from the dining hall to her room. There's a festival nearby today. It's an annual event. I haven't been myself, so if you'd like, we could take a stroll there, I suggested, though it sounded like an excuse even to me. However, Sophia happily accepted the invitation. We agreed to meet at the entrance after dinner. I love the atmosphere of festivals. I used to go a lot with my grandfather when I was a kid, she shared, clearly looking forward to it. Unexpectedly excited, we walked side by side. Her beauty attracted attention. Men and women alike turned to look at her, but she didn't seem to care, and walked on swiftly. Watching her excitedly interact with the ordinary stalls at the festival, I started to have fun too. Various events were taking place at the central square, and she seemed to enjoy them thoroughly. Thank you for today. I had a lot of fun, she said on our way back, looking content. It's a nice place, isn't it? I can see why you'd want to come back, I replied, feeling a bit guilty under a straightforward gaze. I was blamed for a medical mistake and had to quit being a doctor. Actually, I wanted to continue practicing medicine, but the incident blew up so much that there's nowhere in this field that would hire me now. Of course, I find this work at the inn fulfilling too, I confided. Sophia listened intently. So, if there was a chance, you'd want to work as a doctor again? Surprisingly honest, I found myself replying. Yes, if there was a place that would accept me. I see. I think you helping patients as a doctor and working hard to create good memories for guests here at the inn, both are wonderful. She smiled satisfactorily. Thank you, I managed to say, overwhelmed by the compliment. Feeling like I had no value beyond being a doctor, her words made me start to seriously consider taking over the inn. The next morning, Sophia left. Can I come again? She asked before leaving, which somehow made me lose my enthusiasm a bit. Yet, I decided to dedicate myself even more to managing the inn, hoping to earn further recognition from her on her next visit. Eugene, a courier has delivered something for you, my brother announced. One day, my brother mentioned to me, and I picked up an envelope. Upon opening it, I found an invitation to a party hosted by Anderson Medical Equipment, the largest medical device manufacturer in the country. Thinking it was a mistake, I set it aside and completely forgot about the invitation afterward. One day, my father called out, Eugene, you have a visitor. I had no idea who it could be, but I went to the entrance where a man in a suit, a stranger, was standing. Mr. Fumpson, I've come to pick you up. Yes. I didn't recognize him, and his talk of picking me up seemed suspicious. Sensing my confusion, the man explained the situation. I am here on behalf of my boss. I believe an invitation to tomorrow's party was sent to you. I tried to make sense of the situation in my head. Does that mean you've come to take me to tomorrow's party? I asked. Yes, we will take a taxi to the airport shortly. I have arranged a ticket for the 6 p.m. flight. Upon arrival, we will go directly to the hotel, where the party venue is also located. You need not prepare anything, just come as you are. Despite his calm explanation, I couldn't keep up. Why would they go to such lengths to have me at this party? Are you sure I'm the one who's been invited? I asked hesitantly. Yes, there is no mistake, the man asserted firmly. Unable to decline under such circumstances, I reluctantly agreed to go with him. We took a taxi to the airport. And ironically, I was on a first-class flight. Being a reception hosted by a pharmaceutical company, it was undoubtedly filled with medical professionals. I didn't understand why I was invited, but I feared that revisiting my past after starting anew might lead to unpleasant experiences. I was already regretting following this mysterious man. After landing, we switched to another taxi and headed to a well-known upscale hotel. In the hotel lobby, the man who brought me said, "I will come to pick you up again tomorrow," and then he left. I was escorted to a suite for some reason. A high-brand suit for tomorrow's party was prepared in the room. No escape now. Dinner had apparently been ordered in advance and was delivered to my room. I decided to make the best of the situation and enjoy the suite. The next day, after getting ready, the same man came to pick me up. We took the elevator down to what seemed to be the largest room in the hotel. Food was arranged buffet style, and as I stood there blankly, a waiter handed me a glass of champagne. I wondered how many people were gathered here. Probably around 100. The crowd was all medical professionals, a familiar array of faces. Some recognized me and began whispering as they looked my way. Pretending not to notice the discomfort, I went to get some food. Then, I heard a familiar voice call out, "Eugene." Looking in the direction of the voice, Sophia was waving at me. Sophia. Dressed in a gown, Sophia was stunning, standing out even in a crowd. She had looked good in her flight attendant uniform and casual clothes during her travels, but today, she was as beautiful as any actress. I couldn't help but stare. "I'm glad you came. Can I get you a drink?" she asked, easing my nerves with her friendly demeanor. "Thank you," I responded honestly. "To reunion." She raised her glass, said that, and took a sip of her champagne. Delicious. Pleased, I asked her. "By the way, Sophia, why are you at this party?" After taking a sip of my champagne, I couldn't help but inquire. "A relative of mine is involved with the organizers. I heard that you would be here too, so I took some time off work," she said with a mischievous smile. As we chatted, the party officially began. The first to speak on stage as the chairman of Anderson Medical Equipment was the man who had fainted on the plane that time. "He's your grandfather, right?" "The company was founded by my grandfather. The current CEO is my father," she replied, still with that playful smile. Then I turned my attention to Chairman Anderson on the stage. "As you know, we pride ourselves on being the top pharmaceutical manufacturer in the country. In pursuit of further development and for the advancement of the medical field, we have been planning a new project. We have built a hospital where we can directly use and manage our pharmaceuticals in clinical settings to see their effects on patients firsthand. It makes sense for the manufacturer, it saves on marketing to doctors, and hospitals get priority access to hard-to-obtain drugs. Plus, they can observe patient outcomes directly." Impressed, I listened until suddenly, "Eugene," my name was called out, the lights dimmed, and a spotlight shone on me. All the guests turned to look in my direction. Blinded by the light, I covered my eyes with my hand, but the announcement came regardless. "We have decided to appoint Eugene Thompson as the director of our new hospital." Confused, I stood there as a voice rang out from the crowd. "That man committed a medical error 2 years ago and was virtually expelled. Can we really trust such a person with a hospital directorship? Without trust in the director, the hospital's management is doomed to fail." The room stirred. The voice belonged to none other than Dr. Vincent, the very person who had pinned the medical mistake on me. With a young doctor, Derek, who had misdiagnosed hyponatremia as epilepsy, by his side. "That's right. Appointing a doctor who made such a grave medical error as director will tarnish the hospital's reputation before it even opens. Derek chimed in, supporting Dr. Vincent. Sophia had told me that Dr. Vincent and Derek were uncle and nephew. But regarding that matter, the chairman began to speak, and the room quieted down again. When the incident made the news 2 years ago, our company's product was mentioned. I personally investigated the incident because our product was involved. And what did we find? Misdiagnosis suspicions came to light. So, that means Eugene is responsible. In front of the majority, I was again being announced as the perpetrator of the medical accident. Suddenly, on Urswe a familiar voice shouted, "No, it's not true. It was the deputy director's misdiagnosis." None of the team involved at the time testified the truth because they were afraid to contradict Dr. Vincent and risk their positions. From there, I officially became the director of the new hospital. Later, the incident 2 years ago was acknowledged not as a medical accident, but as a misdiagnosis by Dr. Vincent. Thanks to a nurse speaking the truth at that party, my innocence was proven. Thus, I became the first director of the hospital, which quickly garnered attention in the medical community. Sophia's grandfather, Mr. Anderson, even asked if I would consider marrying his granddaughter, and I happily accepted the proposal. Sophia resigned from the airline to marry me, and she has been by my side ever since. The hospital's management is going smoothly, and we have been blessed with 2 children. Sophia, now approaching her senior years, is still beautiful and hides nothing. As a couple, we are somewhat famous within the hospital. There's just one secret plan I have kept from Sophia. I'm planning to retire from hospital management next year and return to my hometown with Sophia to take over the family inn. I can already picture the beautiful innkeeper by my side, smiling,